Sabra Johnson, City Class Cars Restoration by Sabra, coming at you, talking to you today about the importance of and why we charge time and materials. It is important that we do that. It protects the company and it protects the consumer. But why do we do that, and why don't we do bids? Because, the first thing you may say as a consumer, you may say as an enthusiast, as a collector, hey, you've been doing this all your life. Why is it you don't know the time? You think about it. You have someone paint your car, and it's a new car. They pretty much tell you how much. If your car breaks down, you go to a local mechanic shop. Within 5 minutes, they go on their computer, and they give you an exact price to the penny. If you're someone who's contracting something at your home, they come in, they pretty much tell you the price. So why isn't it the case with us? I'm going to share with you today on the story of this 1986 F-350, why we charge time and materials. So here we start with many things on this truck. We put a sound system in, a custom interior, a whole lot of stuff on. So we got one last thing left. It's not really that big of a deal. A Dakota digital dash. So it's a digital gauge cluster. The old cluster comes out, the new cluster comes in. How hard can that be? There's one big plug on the back of the cluster. You just pop that connector in there. The connector comes with it. How hard can it be? Then that connector connects to a control box, which controls the brains of everything that's going to happen. How hard can that be? Because to connect from here to there only take about 30 seconds. But it's the other stuff that can be a difficulty for you. So on this vehicle, there's a couple of things you're going to do. You're going to take your main positive, and you're going to take your ignition wire, you're going straight to the battery. That's going to give you your amperage and all that kind of stuff. Now, the good part is they're going to give you a temp sender, and they're going to give you a oil sender. So you're going to come right off the control box, connecting to those points, and as long as you have a good ground, that's going to be fairly simple too. So now you'll know how hot the engine is running. You'll know what's the oil pressure at all times with the car. So how difficult can this be? Well, here's the problem. Everything else has to connect into what's on the vehicle. So what about turn signals? Because the gauge cluster shows you whether you're going left or right. So you have to tie into an existing wire. You have to find the turn signal wire, tie into that turn signal wire. What about low beam, high beam? Again, you're going into an old system. You're going into an old wiring harness. You're connected into there so that that message can come back. Well, what about fuel? Same thing there. You're connected into an old fuel system because we don't change that. You're connected into an old fuel system. You're dependent upon what's there. And that's where this thing gets tricky. So here's what happens with old wiring. When you have old wiring, you might not have the continuity. The wiring still functions for the most part. But when I take fresh power and I tie into that with a new line, and that new line has to power the control box. Not only the control box, it also has to deal with the gauge cluster itself. So that's putting more pressure on this already crippled, old. Can you imagine walking with a cane? You making it, but then somebody just come up and hit you in the back. You may fall. Well, that's what's happening with this wiring. It's like walking on a cane. It's some old wiring, and you're doing good as long as nobody bothers you, as long as the wind don't blow. But just as soon as the wind blow, the rain come, you done lost all control and fell down. And that's what happens. And so what happened is we will connect in, and what happened is we don't have turn signals. So in the gauge cluster, we don't have left, we don't have right, and maybe we were not contracted out to do the full wiring harness, so now we got a problem. So we got to try to figure out how we're going to solve this. And sometimes that involves running new wiring for that segment or that aspect of the vehicle so that we can get proper continuity and kind of go from there. So that's one of the problems. Now, another problem you have is grounds. If you ever have vintage air or if you ever have a gauge cluster, one of the first things they're going to say, so call vintage air. Hey, tech support, vintage air. I got a problem. First thing they're going to say, do you have good grounds? They don't even really listen to what the problem is. Hey, my gauge cluster is not working. Hey, my AC is not blowing. My heater is not doing. The defroster is not working. First thing they're going to say, do you have good grounds? So grounds are very, very important. One of the problems we have on this vehicle here is it's a 40-something-year-old vehicle. It's been around for a long time. Ain't no telling who all worked on it. So the problem we run into is everyone who's been in this business, you understand black is brown. Black is brown. Well, in this case, they said orange was ground. So you can imagine just, we are trained as professionals to follow a certain map. We're trained to follow a certain sequence. Now we can troubleshoot advanced and kind of work it out and figure all these things out. But what happens is every technician who's touched an old car like this, they haven't operated off those disciplines. They just made it work. And so now we have the challenge as professionals. We got to now figure out how to make it work. Because most of the consumers, let's face it today, they don't know how to work on cars. They don't know how to turn that key, hit that gas, and drive down the road. So all they say is, man, my turn signal's not working. You all didn't fix this right. I paid you good money. I thought you were professionals. It's your wire harness, man. So then the same thing is there. But here's what we had the biggest problem. Our challenge is this truck here has 2 tanks. Some of you all familiar with Ford trucks and these work trucks of this era, Chevy as well. They had 2 tanks. There's a front tank and a rear tank. Well, there's a selector switch inside the vehicle that sends a message down to a selector valve. And that selector valve sends a message and it gives an indication as to which tank we want it to work. Pretty simple technology, right? So here's the way it works. So we're trying to tie in this gauge cluster into this system that's already here. And we start running into problems. 2 problems. We ran into problems with a switch and we ran into problems with valve. So the problem with the switch that was in here, the switch in here, it has the ability to send voltage, but it can't hold voltage. So that was a problem for what we're doing. The next problem is, look at this here. Now this is what came off. This is a universal system. It was somebody else's truck before we got it. So I can't say they're wrong because it was their vehicle. These are the things that we face as technicians. This is what you thought would work. And it didn't work. Or at least it worked temporarily. So this is down there. And so what you have here, this is not even the right size, but you have this going up to the carburetor. So this, you got one coming up to the main carburetor. And then you have one in and one out. Now right here, this is a free flow. So this is free flowing. So then the switch, the way it was set up before, would send a message here, and then it would kick it up here. And then it will flow here, it will flow there, flow that. Kind of how that system works. Now, there's a couple of problems with this. Now, this is what we put on. Let me see, where's the front? That's the front. This is what we put on. You see the difference? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Completely different. So what's the main thing we see here? This one has a motor in it that operates the system. This one does not have a motor in it that operates the system. This is a free flow here. But here's the main thing. All right. This one here, you got to have a return. This one has no returns. It has in, but it has no return back. So if you got an in and your fuel comes in and it's dumping too much fuel in the carburetor, then it's going to overload. You get a little bit too much pressure, and sometimes that fuel has to kick back that way. That's what the return is for, so the vehicle operates properly and all that kind of stuff. Well, this one didn't have that. It doesn't have that. This one now has the capacity for that. So then we have one that goes to the carburetor, and we have one that goes to emissions. Now, this particular truck, we're not concerned about the one with emissions, but we got one that goes into the carburetor, and we got 2 ends. The other thing you see with this one versus this one, you see how one is larger than the other? The larger one is always in. The smaller one is always the return. So when you look at this 5/8, and you look at this side, it did just wrong from a professional perspective. Now, if you're a do-it-yourself and you're doing this at home, is this wrong? Hey, baby, if it works, it works. So I'm not going to say it's wrong. But when the pros get to the car, we're going to come at it a little bit different. Our challenge is different. So now we have to buy a part that we should not have had to buy. So how could I bid your truck, bid your project, and I don't even know you have this thing under that? And so now I have to, first of all, discover that this is the problem. So that's advanced diagnostics. Now I got to get all up under there and look and see what's going on. So then I find out that this is a bad deal here. Well, that's more time, and time is money. So we have that going on there. Then I have to connect this and put it on. Now the other problem I have, the switch up here is wrong. So that's why when we bought this, we also bought a new selector switch that has the ability to flow current. I won't go too far in that, but flows current and not just sends current, and it can hold current. And so there's a new switch up there. Well, how I knew you needed that switch. So now we got a new switch up there, and we got this part here. Hey, that's all we had to do. No, sir. So then we get into the wiring. The problem we have, we connect the wiring in the proper way, and we find that the system is not working. It's almost working backwards, the kind of thing, you know. But it's working sporadically. It's not functioning right. So now I got to go get the original diagram of the actual truck to see how the wiring schematics go. So then they give you all your colors. Hey, isn't that pretty easy? Green to green, blue to blue, orange to orange, yellow to yellow, blah, 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 right? Fairly simple process. Well, why when we get down here, none of the color of these wires match these wires? See, someone in their creativity put this on there that was wrong, and someone in their creativity changed all them wires around, man. So that's more time, that's more money, that's more effort that we have to spend on that. But we don't just know that this is the problem. We have to keep diagnosing, and then we determine, well, this is wrong here, so then we have to fix that. So, okay, we think we got it. Then we something else. Now, this is wrong, so we have to fix that. That's how it works with classic cars. That's how the game goes. That's how the difficulty goes. Because when you're getting a gauge cluster, you don't think you're going to need a selector switch, and you're going to need a selector valve, and we're going to have to reroute all the wiring now from your sending units all the way up. Now, the good news is, if there is some good news, at least the sending units work. So we didn't have to change the sending units. The sending units work. But what happens sometimes, we'll put a gauge cluster in someone's car, they'll keep their old fuel system and all that, and they'll go, well, the gas hand is not working. Well, it's related to something in that tank. Could be the sending unit went out or something of that nature. So I just want to show you the amount of time we have in this one. The amount of time we have putting a gauge cluster in, and the amount of gray hair we have from putting this gauge cluster in. Man, it's just a gauge cluster. That's a clear example of why you must, as a builder, charge time and materials, and why you, as a consumer, you must understand that when we charge you time and materials, all we're saying is we're just a small business, man. And if we spend an extra 2 days on this vehicle, we need to be compensated. And there's no way going into this situation, we're going to know we're going to have to spend more time. So when you look at this truck versus another truck that didn't have some of these problems, this vehicle here would have taken 3 times the amount of time that would have taken another individual. So even if I say, well, the last person who had an F-350, he paid X. Your amount could be 3 times that because your vehicle is different, or your amount could be 2/3 less than his amount because your vehicle is different. Every vehicle is different, man. That's the reason we charge time and materials.